Welcome back to the Two Gay Dads podcast and into our kitchen. We are so grateful that you all are with us. Listen, our last few episodes have been absolutely amazing. Our episode with Jamil had over 50,000 streams on YouTube. We are so grateful that this community is growing and expanding. Now we need your help just a little bit more. Just if you could make sure you hit that subscribe button, to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, so we can continue to build this podcast. Our goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers by Lizzy's birthday. So if everyone who's streaming it could just like and subscribe to our podcast, we would hit that number with no problem. So today's episode centers on sibling love, and we've talked about our side of the adoption journey, but what is it like for our families who supported us through this adoption journey? And what is this unbreakable bond that not only exists between Nate and his sister, but between Lizzy and her Tante Suzy? We'll explain the Tante title in the next segment. So with a few laughs and some family stories about drowning in SpaghettiOs, and of course we'll talk about this week on the gay agenda.
But first, Daddy, I think that we should give our audience an update on our move and how it's coming together as we face this 700-mile journey down the road to the next place we're going to live.
I think it was really hard when we went out to dinner and we celebrating the fact that we had accepted the offer on our house, and we shared with Lizzy that we had accepted an offer and that the move was coming, but she got to finish kindergarten, do her dance recital, and we saw the tears well up in her eyes. I think that was hard. I think that would be hard on any parent. So we will be moving in the middle of June. And so we will be taking a couple weeks off of the podcast in the middle of June as we transition our lives from Ludington, Michigan to Loudoun County, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And we're going to call that the end of season 1, and we'll be back in early July with season 2 of our podcast. So that's our timeline. That's how it's going to impact the show and our listeners. Papa, what was it like for you being part of the discussion and telling Lizzy, that we were going to be moving from the only home she really remembers?
Amazingly, we listed a house last year and it sat on the market. We had accepted an offer and that deal fell through. This time around, we got an offer on our first showing. So it was very fast. And, which has been a blessing. They've been able to work with our timeline. It's a lovely couple. But I had a follow-up conversation with Lizzy last night. The new owners were going to come over to meet us and so we could go through some stuff with them. And it was very much the same experience that we had at that dinner, where she just, she looks at me and she goes, "I don't want to move." And, it's hard to try. We've read the blogs on how to sell your kid on it. Yes, she did ask for a puppy. No, we're not getting her one.
But she is getting bunk beds.
She is getting bunk beds. So that was the detente. But she it's the same, very much the same experience. It's hard. And I think for us, it's been we've moved a lot. In the past, it's always been, an experience that just affected us. This one's really affecting her. And also thinking, okay, we're moving an hour outside of the city. We both work downtown. We can't just, we don't like it, and so we're going to move closer. She's going to be in a school system. And so it really it changes how we move, where we move, how that works. And so it's been a different experience this time around.
We have tried to center her in all of our decisions around our move, right? We centered her around where we're living because they have great public schools. We have the timeline in terms of letting her finish her first year of kindergarten and do her final dance recital with her dance school were non-negotiables for us. So trying to minimize the adult nature of our decision to move so that long-term we can spend more time together as a family. That's the driver behind the move. But it's going to impact your kids. So how can we minimize the impact of what I like to call adult stuff on our kid?
And I think about all the exciting stuff we're going to get to do. We're going to be in Washington, D.C. the summer of the 250. I think, like I talked about in the show, we might be a little bit more selective about what we participate in, especially given the environment that we're in. But, but I also think before we left, we used to go to the National Cathedral and we got to do some really cool stuff. Now we get to show her that stuff, showing her the Smithsonian's, assuming that they are still funded, So there are things I look forward to getting to do. I will definitely be more excited when we get to do them under an administration that's not trying to tear us down top to bottom. But it's still Washington, D.C. is an amazing place. And I look forward to getting to show her that and getting to show her New York and the other places that are accessible within a few hours. It'll be good. It'll be an adjustment, but we are going to make it the best for her because that's what parents do.
So we are really looking forward to being back. We are looking forward to the home stretch of our first season here of the Two Gay Dads podcast. And we've wanted to share with all of you like where we are. And so with that, let's get to our interview with Tante.
So joining us today is my sister, Suzy, or affectionately in our house known as the Oracle. Suzy spent 19 years working in childcare and has been a steady, grounding presence throughout our family formation journey, and including supporting us during the adoption process, which can be long and frustrating. And she even appeared in Lizzy's adoption video with her birth mom. While much of that love happens from a distance, her bond with Lizzy has become one of the most meaningful relationships in our family, especially during the 2 weeks that they spend together every summer. Today, Suzy brings her perspective as an aunt, a sibling, a longtime childcare professional, and a civil servant whose work continues to focus on kids, family, and community.
Hi, my name's Lizzy. This is Two Gay Dads. Let's get right into it.
So, Suzy, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys.
Welcome, Tante. We are so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for making time this evening. So before we get too far into this, I just have to ask so that everyone else can hear it, not from my lips, because many people have. Is it true you tried to drown your brother in SpaghettiOs?
Okay. I did not try to drown him in SpaghettiOs. I was left in charge of him.
And you just
He
didn't
fell
help?
asleep. Well, his face plopped in them and there were still bubbles. So I did not try to drown him. Had I let the bubbles stop, I think it would have been a problem. But, I was just observing his sleeping.
I feel like the line between murder and manslaughter here is getting a little fuzzy.
Well, I also the way your mother tells a story is that she had to intervene because the bubbles had stopped.
Okay, I'm going to have a conversation with my parent because Suzy's 4 years older than I am, but I'm not sure Lizzy would pull her sibling out. Like, where was mom? We need to bring mom in for a follow-up conversation on this, I think.
Yeah, probably.
All right. So for the two of you, you're obviously very close. And, Nate, you just mentioned that Suzy is 4 years older than you are. At least, I know her birthday. We'll see if you actually get it right this year. But that's a
April
discussion
14th.
for no, April 12th. But one day you'll get it right. Anyways, how would the two of you each kind of describe the relationship that you have?
I think we have a great relationship. I think we always have. We've always been very close. When Nate was in his 20s and living in Florida, and I was a young mom in my 20s, we definitely had lost a little bit of that connection as we were just going through different places in our lives. But throughout the years, as we both matured and moving forward, and as our parents are aging, we've definitely gotten closer. We got a connection back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that those early years were messy, but you were also such a huge part of like when I came out. You were the first person in the family I came out to. I might have hooked up at your house a couple times, but also I would stay at your place. Sometimes you and I just needed to get out of the house. And not that mom and dad were great, but they were at the beginning. I was still in private Christian school. They were like more strict. And so, I used, you were such a great source of kind of a pressure valve for that.
So Suzy, in your family, Nate is, at least by your mother, referred to as the baby. So when did it shift in your mind that Nate went from being the baby to, oh my gosh, the baby's having a baby? What was that shift like for you?
I'm sorry, there was a shift.
Maybe.
I have no comment.
What was that transformation like when it went from, looking at your little brother who had been, Uncle Nate to your kids to, oh my gosh, now I get to be an aunt, or Tante as we call you?
It was really cool though, actually, because I didn't think he would ever have a kid. It's not something that he had thought was in his cards. And so that shift was just amazing to watch him to grow in this relationship with you, Jason, and then to add Lizzy, it's just been an amazing experience to watch.
Well, and I think that like there's a lot of there are people who like want to be a parent and it's my dream and all this, and it's this conversation that's ongoing. For me, it was more like an epiphany, which happened in your living room. But I remember Jason and I were at your house. We were in town for the holidays, and you had a house full of a brood of children that you were caring for, and one of the little boys just like kind of bouncing off the walls but kept bouncing into our laps, and I thought like it just something hit me, and I'm like, I think I'm ready to be a parent. And we got in a car and I told Jason, I said, I think I'm ready to be a parent, and I think he almost drove
Best
off the
Christmas
road.
present ever.
But it's it is like, for me it was a different journey than I think some people. It wasn't a dream that I had necessarily, but it just hit me one day, and I'm glad it did, because now I get to have this beautiful experience of raising a lovely 5-year-old who is great. Which I think we should pause and explain why that has been. We did this in the last show too. We used the great. I think you said that you're great or something, and so like, can you give us the context for the great that we will be probably saying for the rest of the podcast?
So we'd taken Lizzy out for the day. We went swimming, and she had decided as an aunt and uncle, she was going to tell us like how she felt about some things. And one of the things she mentioned was that sometimes Papa tells me to knock it off, and I don't want to knock it off. And Uncle Ryan says, but maybe he wants you to stop doing what you're doing. And she looked at him very pointedly and said, Uncle Ryan, I'm great. We use it all the time now. We use it on each other when we get, we're playfully, and I'll say, Ryan, I'm great, so it's just become a household thing now.
I do think you're great, Tante. I do think you're pretty special. You were in childcare for 19 years, right? We always try to short you a year. I don't want to make sure we don't short you.
Don't short me that year.
That painful year. So you were in childcare for 19 years. And you were so supportive during our adoption journey and the process. Was there a part of this where you're like, man, I really wish I could tell them X to help them prepare, but they're just going to have to learn it on their own?
Honestly, there really wasn't. Now, not yet. Raising a daughter headed towards teenage years, I have some things that I think will be coming that maybe Tante will be used in advisory, but I think far you guys have been pretty informed and doing amazing.
Forever the oracle in our lives. That is absolutely true.
And we say that because it's, why is it doing this? Or she's been out of favor. What are we doing about, we would call you all the time with, consult the oracle. And it, between you and Google, I'm not sure how people in like the old days did it, because like that was our guide to parenting. And so much of that was you, which is, why we call you the oracle, because you always have this wealth of knowledge. And most important, I think, in that, the piece of that conversation that sticks with me a lot is when you're like, hey, every kid is different. They will come into their own when they're ready. Yes, she will potty train at 4.5. She's fine. She's great. But yeah, I think like just those little conversations along the way that have helped us not only like be good parents as far as like good care, but also have a good perspective.
At the end of my 19 years, I had potty trained what I could figure up the best as my 22nd child to potty train. And
That's
every
insane.
single one of those is different. Every single kid is different when it comes to potty training. But with everything, every kid is different.
So over or under 10,000, over or under 10,000 diapers that you've changed?
Lord. Well, since most of my kids were before preschool, I'm going to go way over.
Bless you. If I never change another dirty diaper, it's just fine by me.
Well, in like 19 years, that's a generation and a half. I know we were talking when we were in town recently about like the kids that you've seen graduate and now they're having kids that you started with. Like, that's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, actually, one of the kids that I babysat for a number of years just had twin baby girls. So yeah, that was a weird realization for me, honestly, that they're becoming parents.
So, Suzy, we talk on the show all the time about our adoption journey or other people's adoption journey. The perspective we haven't had an opportunity to share yet is, what is it like for you? And what was it like for your family to be so supportive of us, but not necessarily like in the day to day decision making process, but certainly very involved. I mean, you were in our adoption video. So, what was that process like for you?
For us, it was just the fear. I was worried. We were worried for you guys. We were worried it wouldn't happen. We were worried if it did happen and the mother's decision and how that would go.
I know mom talks about you know, us driving down the highway with this car seat in our, that she was terrified that we would come home and the car seat would still be empty. And to be honest, we were too. Like just driving, I remember looking back at that car seat a lot, thinking, what if we come home and it's empty? I think a lot of parents or adoptive parents who could definitely relate to that, and adoptive families who can relate to, the worry that you have for the people that you love most going through this very could be fraught, could be ours was very idyllic, but could be a really fraught experience. And so, thank you for your support from the family side, because that was huge in us being able to do what we did.
A number of families that have experienced it's called a disruption. So when a family is matched, for those who aren't familiar with adoption, when a family is matched and the adoption does not go through, it's called a disruption. Usually happens when a birth parent changes their mind. We were lucky that we didn't have to experience that. I'm not sure what experiencing that would have been like for the two of us, let alone all of the people, which is, they say like, don't tell a whole lot of people when you match. They say all of those things to do that. But, bless the people who have experienced 2 or 3 disruptions and continue to put themselves out there because they want to they want to create, they have a loving home and they want to fill it with a child. And I think that's remarkable. And I think that is some personal resolve that I'm not sure I have.
Yeah.
And then Lizzy comes and you have to contend with the fact that we live 800 miles away and we have all these other women in her life, these amazing dynamic women that were, aunties. And you had to contend with, I'm sure, a little frustration. And then you kind of arrived on Tante. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So at first, because I never thought I would be an aunt on my side of the family, I thought when I heard other people were being called auntie, I was like, well, that's my title. Like I didn't think I would be, and now I am, and now it got taken away or something. But it was a very quick realization that all of these women in her life are such strong presences that she needs, because she's a strong personality and she's a strong woman and she needs those women
She's
to
great.
help guide her. She's great. So, but to differentiate myself, I sort of just went with a more Nordic term for, which is like think tante, but I like auntie. So I went with Tante, and it stuck, and she likes it and I like it, and it differentiates me a little bit from these women. But at the same time, I am so thankful for all of those strong women. And so it was a very quick realization. I just needed to differentiate myself a little bit.
She may have many aunties, but there will only ever be one Tante.
Right.
That is for sure. I mean, I so admire the relationship you have with Lizzy. We've got this little box that you write letters to her that she can open when she's older, and they're just from you to her. And you, every time we're in town, you can see the bond and the connection that she has with you. And well, we are blessed to have you in our life. Man, Lizzy is so lucky that you have taken on this role and this mantle of Tante for her. And I don't know how we can express our gratitude to you for the love you show her. And the sugar, yeah. Well, speaking of sugar, all the sugar you give her, the bedtimes you don't enforce, all the things. We tried to be good to your kids when we would come to town, but man, we never quite got to do that when they were that young. And now there's no revenge, because if they have kids some days, the revenge would be on them. So like, kudos to you, Suzy. You won.
Well played on my part. And there are no rules at Tante's, by the way. So, that's just what we do.
You do have a way with her, though, that like I can tell that you two could go to battle, but she just has this adoring way of like, if Tante says to do it, well, Tante said to do it. And so it must be how it's done.
Whereas if Daddy or Papa say she should do it, then she does the opposite, because she's great.
What do we know?
She knows everything. Nothing. We know nothing.
I can't imagine where she learned that from.
I'm married and I have a 5-year-old. I'm never right and I'm always wrong, and I'm always in trouble.
I'm glad he's finally figured that out. So after 19 years of looking after other kids, raising two children, did you find that you just kind of hopped into like this childcare mode with Lizzy, or was it like auntie first and just like a very different feeling?
No, with Lizzy, it was different. It was just different. I knew I had some leeway to like corrupt her a little bit, you being my brother. So it definitely
Yes,
was a
you
very
did.
different.
I don't have a bedtime when I go to Tante's house. Tante lets me have all the sugar.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? We stay up late and watch like Jersey Shore, not the bad parts, don't come after me, but we watch Jersey Shore and she can fist pump and she quotes Pauly D and yeah, we have a good time.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the bra phase yet, but she definitely calls us dude. And I think what was interesting though is like we didn't come into it necessarily like adoption was always part of our life because our dad is adopted. And so I feel like in a way adoption wasn't it was like this was the first time going through it in a personal way obviously, but it wasn't like a foreign concept. But what was interesting is like leading up to Lizzie's birth, we also reconnected with dad's birth family. And what does he call them? His nieces.
His nieces. They're not our cousins, they're his nieces.
And didn't we just have a conversation with him about this a couple of weeks ago? Because you and I were like, yeah, they're your niece. Because one of them came up and was talking to me, and I was like, I don't really know her that well because I've always wanted them to come over and meet us at the house. And Dad's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I've never really hung out with them. And Suzy, you came over and you're like, because they're your nieces, you own them. The rest of us don't. And he's like, what do you mean?
You called your father out at your mom's retirement party with that when they were sitting at the round table in the church and he still wouldn't introduce you.
That checks out.
He's great. And for those of us that don't, or for those of us, we should really go into this with Dad at some point on the show because I think it's an interesting as an adult adopt a child. And, we talk about, well, our show is parenting. It's also talking about, I think, the adoption journey. But Dad was a baby doe, and that's a whole different experience of adoption. He had a very sealed, secretive adoption, and we didn't find out until we were adults that as a family we went to him and said we'd like you to unseal the records. We'd like to know more, and he did, which was really kind of an interesting experience to go for. And then just 2 years later, Lizzy comes along, and adoption impacts our family again. I know your husband Ryan is adopted as a stepchild, right? Am I right on that? And
Yep.
so adoption's touched his life. And so I think it's just a good, you don't realize how many people in your sphere of your universe have been touched by adoption until you start talking about it. And I think that's what we're trying to do here is have this honest conversation on our show about adoption, because it really does touch more people than you think, than you imagine if you're not talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we found out one of our friends was adopted as well, and we never knew. So it kind of opens the door for people to share their story when they know that you have a connection to it, where otherwise they might not share that.
Yeah.
So, Suzy, is there anything that our adoption process has, and watching us go through it, and obviously, again, being a part of it, has taught you that your 19 years in childcare didn't?
I don't, that one would be one to think on. I think I can't offhand say, childcare, 19 years of childcare sort of prepares you for absolutely anything. So, I think that one would be a little bit harder to answer, but I'm sure it has.
Well, I'd imagine though, in a really lovely way, it's the same. And I think, again, those are the things we talk about, right? Our parenting is no different. And so the connection we have with our child, the way that they behave around us, the fact that, you always say Lizzie's a different kid when she's with somebody that she's not with all the time versus when she's with us, because she knows where we'll blow our lid. She doesn't know where you'll blow yours. Same. And so I think in a really wonderful way, it's very similar, and it follows the same pattern, because our parenting is no different just because we're two men or just because
Right.
she's adopted. Our parenting is no different than the other 22 kids that you potty trained and their families and their interactions were. So I think in a beautiful
Yep.
way, it's the same.
Yep, for sure.
When you left childcare, you transitioned to be a civil servant. The advocacy and the passion continues. And there's this ballot measure in Ohio that could potentially make the ballot and potentially have some very serious impact on on your current role and your current life. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about what the possible outcomes, what it is, number one, and then what the possible outcomes could be?
So there's a group in the state of Ohio that has proposed getting rid of property taxes. I believe they call it Axe the Tax. And this is going to profoundly change things if this is passed. It hasn't made it to the ballot yet. We will know, I think, June 30th, somewhere in there. If it makes it on the November ballot, it's scary. It's a scary thing to think about because a lot of, well, first, educating people where their money goes. Your property taxes stay in your community. Those are funding your local fire departments, your township fire departments. They're funding your senior services. They're funding some of your MRDD stuff. Like these are things that are very necessary for people. And it would really get rid of a lot of those. Some of them it'll wipe out completely. And just knowing your money stays local with property taxes. So when you're getting rid of that, you're getting rid of a lot of those local services or significantly downsizing them. So it's going to be a huge impact on our smaller communities, especially our small farming township communities.
I mean, I don't think we want to get to a spot where we have to dial 1-900-911, right? Or the fire department shows up at your house and you've got to go swipe your credit card on the reader on the side of the truck before they'll pump water. But this is the trajectory we're heading down, right? And Ohio's not the first state to face this. Last year, or excuse me, in 2024, it was on the ballot in North Dakota. It was soundly defeated in North Dakota. They're circulating petitions here in Michigan as well for Axe attacks. And the one thing we didn't mention is that's also our schools, right? Like public schools are funded through property taxes, and we can talk about the inequities of that later. But this is a gigantic issue that hasn't been successful yet, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be successful someplace, and it has a huge impact. I don't know. I like my snow. I like, especially after this winter, I like that I knew my roads would mostly get plowed.
Well, they got like $1 trillion out of the DOT budget that was granted to states and communities to do plowing. I think of it in a couple ways. I'm like, first of all, we don't honor civil service in this country. You're a civil servant. We should honor you. We should take pride in the work that you do. It is a station in our community that deserves a certain level of respect. That when you walk in a room and you say, "I'm a civil servant," that means something. And we've never developed this like they have in Europe. And it's frustrating. Two, local control or local money is local control too. When I spend my local tax money, my local county commissioners and my township trustees in Ohio decide how that money is spent. If you take that away and now the only person who's receiving funds from me is the state, or the state is funding its programs through federal grants, they are deciding. And so it's taking control out of my community and giving it to the state legislature. And like we've been discussing quite a bit on this show, they are not honest brokers and they are not honest folks in this process. So there's a lot of fear and frustration, but in the end of people will die. People, you're talking about the food and sustenance programs for communities. You're talking about food bank programs. You're talking about Meals on Wheels. You're talking about senior centers where old folks get to go and all of these gone. Public libraries gone. And so and I know that maybe people in their selfish view say, well, I don't take part in it, so why should I care? Because these are your neighbors. And so it's just so frustrating to see that this is happening and going across the country, because at the end of the day, it will end up in body bags, and we need to take that very seriously.
And it absolutely needs reformed. We need some reform in the property tax sector. Absolutely. I will agree 100%. But you have a chance to do that when your money's staying local. You can go to, like you said, your commissioners. They show up at the local township fire department pancake and sausage breakfast. Go and ask them the hard questions. Talk about reform. Get these things changed, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's too much. People will die. People in the area that I work in, the local government, we could lose them because of this. And it is terrifying. And one of the things I'm very frustrated with is people who are for this or think they are for this. They say we're just using fear tactics. That's not true. I am seeing the numbers. I'm watching it happen. We were told our doors will be closed. People will suffer because of that. It is fact. So stop telling me fear tactics. That gets on my nerves because it's not. It's not a fear tactic. It's happening. So
And the insidious part behind all of this is, I'm a big at like do some research, find out who's actually funding these ballot measures because they're not cheap. It's not cheap to get the hundreds of thousands of signatures that you need to get it on the ballot in a place like Ohio. It's not cheap to run the campaign. And where this is being run is being run by billionaires who want to be able to swoop into communities, buy investment properties or second and third homes that they then don't have to pay property tax on, but they rent. They probably, in most places, don't live in that state. So they don't care because the other side of this coin is the only way to backfill that is to astronomically raise your sales tax. And again, they don't care because they don't live in Ohio. Or they might come to Ohio 5 days a year. So they don't care if they have to pay a higher sales tax for a couple of trips here or there. It's going to be a business expense and a write-off anyways. And so they're doing this on the backs of communities, knowing that when you raise sales tax, you disproportionately impact the bottom third of the income bracket, so the people who need it the most, because there's no tax break from sales tax. You just pay it on everything. And so it's insidious how they're doing this and why they're doing it.
Because they did tell us if that goes to that direction and sales tax goes up, food will be included in that, and also will healthcare and a few other things people don't think about besides sales tax going up. Yeah, we have people here. I live in Northwest Ohio. They're like, well, we just go to Indiana. Well, that's great for you. But people in Columbus aren't anywhere near another state to just travel a half hour over the state line. What does that do to your economy in your state when you're taking all of your sales out of your state? And then another thing people aren't thinking about is if you take those township fire departments and you centralize them, what happens to your homeowner's insurance? It's going to go through the roof because you won't have a fire department in your township anymore. They're going to be coming from 20, 30 minutes away instead of maybe 5-6 miles away. So those are things people aren't thinking about that are going to be included in what will take place of losing this property tax. You're going to pay one way or another.
Also, I feel like we got to figure out a way to flip the script. Be proud to pay your taxes. Why is it in this country we don't feel like we have to pay for things? And we grew up our dad was volunteer fireman, so I think it's easy that's the place that our mind goes a lot. But like that all costs, a new fire truck costs over $1 million now. Like, where do you think the money is going to come from? And if you do raise sales tax, that is disproportionately going to hurt people at the bottom third of the consumers. And so it's not without serious impact on probably some of the people that are going to vote for this. But it's frustrating. Thank you for giving us your insight and perspective as somebody who's in civil service in Ohio, because I know that it's got to be frustrating to be going through that.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for letting me speak on it a little bit. I'm more passionate about what we do. I'm scared for the people it will affect. So I appreciate you including that in this a little bit.
Well, and I know you, like a lot of civil servants, aren't in it for the money. You're in it because you care about the people that you serve. And
Definitely
kudos
not in
to
it
you
for
for
the
that.
money.
But also, let's honor our civil servants. Let's 3 cheers for those who
Here.
dedicate their lives to service.
Well, Suzy, thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast. You've been a supporter of it and loyal listener every single week since it comes out. So we appreciate you for being a listener. We appreciate you for being, I have the world's coolest sister-in-law. Just y'all can be jealous now if you haven't gotten that. She's
great.
I'm great.
Not sarcastically, Suzy, you are pretty great. So thanks for coming on the show with us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here, sister. I love you, and onward.
All right. Thank you. Love you guys too.
Nate, that interview was almost as incredible as your sister.
She's great. And, there are a lot of heroes in the world. She's great. There are a lot of heroes in the world, but my sister is definitely one of them for me. And I'm so grateful that she took the time to come on the show and share her experiences and stories with us.
So, Papa, as we prepare to close, it is time for...
This is the gay agenda. Queer news uncensored. Stay tuned.
So for today's gay agenda, instead of each of us bringing an issue, I wanted us to focus on one conversation, and that's around conversion therapy. So I'm going to give a little bit of background here. At the end of March, the Supreme Court ruled on a case out of Colorado involving a ban on conversion therapy for minors. In an 8-1 decision, the court basically said that when conversion therapy is framed as talk or conversation, states may not be able to regulate it in the same way they regulate other medical care. They didn't say that conversion therapy works, and they didn't dispute the harm. But by prioritizing speech over protection, the rule opens the door for practices that we know are damaging, especially to LGBT kids. This matters because it ties directly into conversations we've been having around mental health in the LGBT community, about where trauma, shame, and anxiety comes from. So today we want to talk about conversion therapy, even when it's just words, through our lens as gay men, as people who grew up in religious communities, and as people who know how powerful conversations can be, for better and for worse.
So, I have strong opinions about conversion therapy. I think that there are study after study and organization after organization that condemn it as an invalid form of therapy that doesn't work. You're not teaching people to not be gay, to not be a lesbian, to not be trans. You're teaching people how to suppress emotions, and that's terrible. But, Pop, I know you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but earlier this week on their Tuesday edition of Pod Save America, one of our favorite podcasts to listen to. Hey, guys, we'd love to have any of you on the show. Side note, but they interviewed Congresswoman Sarah McBride. And for those who don't know Congresswoman McBride, she's the first ever trans member of Congress in our country's history. And when she first got elected,
She's great. I just want to point out, she's amazing.
She is. She once upon a time was my intern at the Victory Fund. She has such an incredible gift, and she was so targeted by members of the Republican Party when she first was sworn in. But during the interview, she said something to John Lovett, who did the interview, and it stuck with me, and I don't know that I'll ever forget it. And we can talk. There was a bunch of strategy around how you advance LGBTQ issues and this and that, but at the core, and I'm paraphrasing what she said, and I'm certainly not going to say it anywhere near as eloquently as Congresswoman McBride did. But what she said in essence was, we may be okay with this ruling or rulings like it, that we need to be careful about how much we want courts ruling on things like healthcare and how much we want the government, especially if the wrong people are in power, regulating healthcare decisions. That it might actually be better to let parents make those decisions, not the government. And that while we could argue that and know that some parents, Papa, may not make the same decisions that you and I make or we would make for Lizzy, that overwhelmingly, if the parents are making those decisions with talking to the doctors about what's best for their kid instead of following government regulations, we would probably, and we might, be helping more kids than the other way around.
Can you expand on that? I think that what you're getting at is that by removing the government, by the government not being involved in the same way or not regulating, that we are also saying that we aren't going to regulate or be able to regulate trans conversations with young people and their doctors and their families. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I think, you can ban conversion therapy about as well as you can ban abortions. Are going to find crazy doctors who will ignore the bans and do them anyways. And, on the one hand, if we're arguing around women's healthcare decisions and her decision to do what's right for her body without government intervention, even though we know this is a harmful practice, and that's where this gets murky. But aren't we better leaving those decisions between the medical professionals and the people they're treating, knowing that some people are going to make decisions that we wouldn't agree with, and we might make decisions that other people wouldn't agree with? But her kind of point was like, we can't have it both ways. We can't have it on this issue. We do want the government involved in regulating it. And on this issue over here, we can't have the government involved in regulating it. That these decisions are better left to between the patient and the doctor and whoever else the patient decides to bring in to help make their decision.
Yeah, and I would imagine that is how we got to the 8-1 decision. That's how a couple of those progressive judges, found on the prevailing side of that case. And I do want to point out Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's amazing, was the dissent on it, the dissenting justice. And her point was that the ruling undermines states' ability to regulate medical care and risks grave harm to Americans' health and well-being, and emphasized that speech inside a professional therapeutic relationship is not the same as speech in the ether. But I think, to your point, it is easy to conflate that this issue is very, like, something very passionately discussed in our community and hated in our community, with the nuance of a case. And these cases, to your point, are nuanced, and sometimes we may have to lose on one to win on one down the road, or to ensure that the broader issues are able to be discussed down the road or just at all. And I think like that's a really important piece to this conversation.
I don't want anyone to confuse what I shared and the Congresswoman's. Again, I would check out that podcast episode to hear her exact words. I'm paraphrasing her, and again, nowhere near as eloquent as the Congresswoman. I don't want anyone to confuse that for like me condoning or supporting conversion therapy. It's an abomination. It is terrible. And every major healthcare organization has discredited it. And the other reality is like any form of therapy or conversation that starts with an assumption that there's something wrong with you is inherently harmful. Like I have gone to therapy. Going to therapy helped save our marriage. It helped repair my relationship with my family. I'm a better person because I went to therapy. And never once in any of those discussions did my therapist say, Jason, you're the problem. Jason, there's something wrong with you. She may have over time pointed out things that, like, behaviors I could change or modify, or things I might want to do differently in the future. But there wasn't this assumption that something was wrong with me, that I'm a flawed person.
Yeah. So as we draw into the conversation about conversion therapy a little bit, just some interesting information. About 5% of LGBT youth in the U.S. have been subjected to conversion therapy. Of those youth, 27% attempted suicide.
That's 1 out of 4, folks, for those who can't do math.
Which is more than twice the rate of their peers who are not exposed to conversion therapy. Survivors report higher rates of depression, anxiety, CPTSD, shame, social isolation, and long-term difficulty forming authentic relationships. So we're not talking about having a conversation that you don't like. We're talking about real systemic damage that is done to LGBT people, most often from religious communities, who are subjected to therapy to try to change who they are.
Because you can't pray away the gay. Like, end of the day, you can't pray away the gay. And as I open this segment saying, you're not teaching someone how to not have same gender attraction. You're
teaching them to suppress it.
Yes. And you're not teaching, there's nothing wrong with who you're attracted with. There's nothing wrong. Like, again, like the whole notion of the whole premise of this therapy is that something's wrong with you. Like, I have a cold. So here, let me give you this medicine and I'll fix you. Queer people aren't broken, but conversion therapy breaks queer people.
Yeah. And it's important to note, conversion therapy is discredited by every major medical and mental health organization. This is not, there's nobody out here who's saying that this works. And the reason I wanted to frame this in a way around having a conversation coming from people who grew up in religious communities, mine a religious piece a little bit more conservative than yours, because you grew up in an ELCA Lutheran church, and the broader Christian community of the ELCA Lutheran church has been accepting for a long time, and well done to them. I grew up in a Methodist church in a time when a Methodist church was having this discussion, but I also was attending a private Christian school where, when I came out, I left because I knew I would be asked to leave. And, I remember altar call after altar call after altar call. And I remember going up and begging God to take this away from me. And so if praying did it, if that was how it worked, then my life would have been different, and I would have been cured of this, what I was taught was a sin. So I think, like, that's an important, like, praying it away doesn't work. And I know, because I tried. And so it is deeply personal. And thank God nobody tried to put me, my parents were accepting and loved me from the get-go, but I can't imagine if they tried to put me into therapy and what it would have done. I mean, and my mom did ask when I came out, she said, do you need help, but she didn't mean to change who I was. She meant to make sure that I was going to be okay. And I think like we need more parents that react that way, not parents who say you're broken and we need to go fix you, because that's just no way to treat your kids.
I think the other concern is like this just fits into the broader attacks on LGBTQ rights. And, I've had conversations with family members. Oh, we can't do this because it's a slippery slope. We can't do that because it's a slippery slope. Listen, we're sliding down a slippery slope right now when it comes to LGBTQ rights in this family. We covered the driver's license bill in Kansas. That's now law. 1,500 plus people lost their driver's license in Kansas overnight with no grace period. The felony, if you use the wrong bathroom 2 times in 5 years, what someone else determines is the wrong bathroom, not you, that is now law in Idaho. This ruling now fits into the bans we're seeing on affirming school curriculum, restrictions in some southern states on gender affirming care. And now it's a double-sided sword, and I respect that. But now we're setting limits on states on how they can and can't regulate healthcare. I just like how many we talked about the property tax bill or ballot measure in Ohio and how that's going to leave dead bodies. Conversion therapy leaves dead bodies. Period.
And I think there's something inherently dangerous in this idea that, it's loving concern, but then you're saying, well, God's love is unconditional for everybody else, but not for you. God's love is conditional on you. If you can pray enough and you can be straight enough, or you can pretend to be straight at least, then God will love you. And, authenticity is dangerous. You have to conform, and survival comes before truth. You have, these ideas that are just inherently awful and dangerous. And this is what we're instilling in children. And you wonder why they come out of this. What was, with the inability to have relationships and long-term care, because they come out believing that everything is flexible. And maybe if they just try hard enough, if they're just good enough, if they just love the right way, if they just feel the right feelings, then someone will love them. And that's really, and that includes, in a lot of these settings, their parents saying, I will love you if you can conform to this thing that I want you to be. And, I'm a firm believer. I don't believe that unconditional love exists outside of a parent-child relationship. I think that, you hear it thrown around a lot in weddings, which are a ceremony of conditions to love. I don't believe in unconditional love in that setting, but having become a parent, and this is a parent show, I understand unconditional love in a different way. And so that I would never tell my child that my love is conditional if she just conforms to this thing, this construct that I have formed as what normal is. And, or worse, if she conforms to what my social group sees as normal. How inherently damaging is that? It's really, at the end of the day,
where is God in that, right? We've talked and we've danced around how this is being driven by many in the religious community, but it's also driving people away from religion when it's seen as this exclusive club. Because of my experience at the college that I went to, that was not a welcoming and accepting or affirming place, at least from the administration. I struggled with my faith for years. You helped bring me back to faith. I had others along the way who encouraged me. I had my former college advisor, Dr. Johnson, may he rest in peace. We just lost him about a month ago. He told me when I first came out to him that my faith and that being gay were not mutually exclusive. And while I hear that now, 20 years later, I wasn't in a position to hear it and understand the gift of his words in that moment. But, I remember we used to do this thing in church when we talk about the 3 different forms of love. And the biggest form of love, I'll never forget this because we had Love Sunday in our Lutheran church. And it was agape love. And that is the love that God has for us if you are a person of faith, if you follow the Christian faith. And what it was said is that God's love is unconditional. He doesn't put strings on it. He doesn't put conditions on it. If you are a person who follows the Christian faith, we just celebrated Easter. In our faith, in our chosen tradition, Jesus came and paid the price for all of our sins. And so trying to do anything else is inauthentic and harmful, and it pushes people away.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation with somebody. I am soothed in my spirit by a God that is fallible and that has grown. And I believe, and this is just my belief, that the Bible is a demonstration of a God who grows. And he tries all these things to just force us to conform to some show of almost narcissistic love for him. And, because of free will, we buck the system every time. We survive the flood. And we just go back to our ways, right? And then he just like any parent, again, we're a parent show. He throws up his arms and he goes, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And then I'm going to, in a most beautiful expression of showing this to you, I'm going to come to be amongst you and experience your life. And then I'm going to just be done with this judgment thing and just say, you know what? We're going to move on in a way that is truly unconditional love, that is truly without conditions, that is truly rooted in a justice that is beyond comprehension. And so, I am soothed by that idea. And that's where I find my faith. And I don't think that God has conditions on his love, because what kind of God does that? So, I think as we wrap up this conversation, just some reaffirmations that queer kids aren't broken. Love is not conditional, and authenticity is not something to apologize for. And even if it's just words, the Supreme Court didn't affirm that people could go and put electrodes under fingernails, but they did say that you could use words to try to change people. And that's still really harmful. Words are harmful. They will continue to be harmful. And so, and I want to say that. And I want to say this too. I had a note on my show flow for today. We've had this viral thing that's been going around about mental health in the LGBT community and the amount of LGBT young people that don't think that they'll live past 35. And it's been great. The comments just keep coming, and I'm glad that people are seeing it. We got a comment about 3:00 today, and it was a guy who said, just do it. Just do it. Do it, do it, do it. You are vile, and you have no place here, and you have no place in the Christian community. And so, those words matter. I hit the comment because I don't want other people to see that, because this is our platform. And this is where LGBT people can come and see. And I didn't want them to see that. Those words are harmful, and shame on you. And you are not welcome here. And so, I just want to underline that those words do matter. And it mattered to me. It affects me, because it feels like it steals a little piece of me when something like that is said. And that is evil. And I know that. But it still hurts. And so let's do better, friends, loved ones, and how we treat each other, especially in the shadow of the Easter season.
The worst phrase ever invented is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Some of the most painful experiences of my life are because of words people have said to me. I did not have to seek help with a therapist. And I say that proudly because of something that physically happened. And so, as we wrap this up, let's do something we haven't done in a couple of weeks. Something happy to close the show. We have the coolest 5-year-old. Lizzy teaches us every day. But Papa, what did you learn from Lizzy this week?
Well, Lizzy started soccer this week, and it's
You
been an
stole
experience.
mine.
Well, I don't know. We'll get there. It was 30 degrees on her first day of practice, which was awful. It snowed earlier today. It snowed yesterday. I am so over winter. I am fighting a cold. I'm sure that the microphones have picked me up coughing. My voice is not what it normally is. Jason is a couple days ahead of me on his cold recovery. Lizzy has not, knock on wood, come down with it badly yet. But she and I got out today. It was 70 degrees. We got out in the yard. We were playing soccer. And I've learned that I'm a little bit, well, we knew this. I'm competitive. I'm so competitive, I don't enjoy things. So I'm probably not the right parent to be doing this with her. But just learning to be a little bit more patient and understand that our little person may not necessarily completely comprehend what it means to be in sports just yet. Trying to get her to drive the ball toward me, and she kept driving the ball wherever the ball went. And our friend calls it bunch ball, which I'm sure that you'll get to as well, because everywhere there's a ball, there's a bunch of kids. So just trying to be patient with her as I'm trying to help her do well, but also understand that her 5-year-old little brain just she's not either not competitive or she's just not there yet. And I need to be more patient with her. What about you, Daddy?
So I'm gonna pivot away from soccer. So I was putting her to bed tonight, and I leave before she'll be up tomorrow morning. I leave on a work trip, 4 days, 3 nights, so not a overly long trip. And we were having a discussion about Daddy leaving, and she did her no, Daddy, don't go. And we talked about how with this move, we hope that this means less travel and more family time. And my kid looked at me, and I had never heard her say this phrase before. She's like, "Okay, Daddy, I'll give you grace on this trip."
Where does she pick this stuff up?
Kindergarten.
She's listening more than we think she is.
She absolutely is. And so by the grace of my child, I can go do my job, my regular full-time job over this weekend and be out of state. But I thought if my kid is practicing showing grace, then hopefully all of us who are listening can help show a little more grace in the world today. So with that, if you are enjoying the show, like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever you would like. But just make sure you give us a follow. We are enjoying doing this. We will be back with you next week with hopefully yet another guest as we continue our streak of having guests on the show. We love having them on. We know you enjoy that. We've heard that feedback from you as well. So until next week, I'm Jason.
I'm Nathan.
Onward.
Onward.